in hindsight, I can see all the things I did right without knowing how to do it. But when I left that third job, I thought it would be easy to get the next one. And I meet people professionally who still have that experience. What I didn't understand is how hiring works. And once you understand that, then marketing and selling yourself is an important part of it, but it's not the only thing. You've also got to know what you want to do and where you want to work and what you offer to employers.
Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. Hello and welcome to the Job Hunting Podcast. It's in the middle of winter here in Melbourne. I'm recording this in the middle of a very tough lockdown, and it was a pleasure today to speak to somebody who is experiencing a very nice warm summer weather up in the Northern Hemisphere. Mac Prichar is a fellow podcaster and the co-host of Find Your Dream Job podcast. I noticed from reviewing my podcast statistics that my listeners were also listening to Mac's podcast. So I decided to reach out to him and introduce myself. He wrote a lovely review of my podcast on iTunes, and I then invited him to come in for a chat. And it's a pleasure for me to meet people from all over the world and get to know fellow career enthusiasts like Mac and understand how things are going up where he is based and how similar or different it is from where I am. It's a very important part of my job, keeping up with things that are happening all around the world. I have listeners from all around the world, and I have clients from all around the world. So it's really important to me. And to be able to share that catch up with you is also, I think, that's a very interesting thing that I can do instead of just talking to Mac by myself. And we then discussed a whole bunch of things that I think you will enjoy listening to, reinforcing some of the messages from previous episodes, but also coming up with some new ideas for you. Mac is the founder and publisher of Mac's List. Mac's List is a job board in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, helping employers and job candidates in Portland and Seattle. Mac also operates Prichar Communications, a public relations agency that serves nonprofits, public agencies, and foundations across the United States. As I said, he has a podcast about careers, so make sure that you find your dream job podcast and listen to it as well if you haven't done so. I'm assuming some of you already do that because that's how I found out about it. And he wrote a book that there's a link to the book below. So if you want to know more about Mac's book about job hunting, that's a great resource for you. I haven't read it yet, but I'm ordering one for me. So I will tell you in the future my experiences. But based on this conversation I had with him, I'm sure I'm going to love it. So what did we talk about? I will tell you in a minute, but before I do that, I want to invite you to subscribe and follow this podcast, please, wherever you found this. If you found this on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcast, you can subscribe, you can follow, leave me a review. I'd love for you to hear from you and know what you thought about this episode or other episodes that you liked. And also please rank, because this is how podcasts get found. This is how people find podcasts like the Job Hunting Podcast. So it will be really an honor to receive that little gift from you if you can subscribe to my newsletter. I have a weekly newsletter for job seekers and career enthusiasts. It goes out every Tuesday morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time, with a new episode and lots of interesting articles that I curate specifically for job seekers and people that are keen to make great career plans and advance in their career. So I'm very careful about what I choose to share. And I also, update you on what's happening, what's news. And if you're listening to this episode, you probably know that we're we're running the group coaching at the moment by the time this episode goes to air. And it's always a pleasure for me to do my group coaching program. If you want to know about my services and understand what else is there for you to do before the end of the year, go to my website, renatabernardi.com. There's a link to it in the episode show notes as well, and find out how you can participate as a client, or, maybe attend one of my free masterclasses, join the Facebook group. There's lots of opportunities for you not to feel lonely in your job hunt. This is my biggest mission on earth, is to make sure that the job candidates feel supported, feel that they have the knowledge to go through recruitment and selection. And I have a feeling that this interview will reinforce that I'm not alone in this, because Mac has this wonderful job board, and he has experienced, like I have, unemployment and decided to do something about it in a very different way from me. But we have the same DNA and the same mission in life. So I'm very keen that I have found him from such faraway land. We discuss what led Mac to start a job board, the importance of understanding how recruitment works, how the pandemic affected Mac's job board and how it's recovering from it, skills that are important post-pandemic for job seekers to know of and activate as soon as possible, and organizational culture in a virtual world. How is it going to be developed? How are we going to actually build this and design this new organizational culture when we're not actually physically with each other? So we discuss lots of interesting things and share experiences from Mac's career, and the reasons why he thinks it's so important to share that knowledge now with job seekers out there that are keen to find a job, keen to advance in their careers. We both have podcasts. I have lots of services and I coach people, and he has this great job board and activates a lot of great things in not only in his region, but because of the podcast, reaches out to a global audience like I do. So there's a lot of common ground here that we share. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, follow me, subscribe, and follow Mac's podcast as well. Hi, Mac.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Yeah.
Excellent. Look at us catching up from, the other side of the world.
Yes, you're in the future. I'm in the past.
Just a few hours behind. What time is it now?
Oh, gosh, it's 7 p.m. on Monday here. Tell me your date and time.
It's 12 p.m. on Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a little different. When you're in Australia, you're far away from everything. You feel like you're on the bottom of the world at times.
Yeah. Well, I've never been there, but it's on my list, and I just hear wonderful things about Australia.
Well, we're in half the country is in lockdown at the moment. So why don't you tell us how are things where you are? Where are you? Let people know where you are.
I'm in Portland, Oregon. We're in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and we're about an hour from the Pacific Ocean, and 12 hours by car north of San Francisco, about 10 hours south by car south of Vancouver in British Columbia.
And what led you to base yourself in this beautiful area? I'm assuming it must be gorgeous.
It's a lovely part of the country, and my wife and I came here 30 years ago this summer. We were living on the East Coast of the United States in Boston. We'd been there for almost a decade, and we wanted a change in life, and we were attracted by the quality of life in the Pacific Northwest.
Mac, I've interviewed a couple of people that have made big career changes, but included with that tree changes or sea changes. Do you feel like that's what you've done as well?
2 or 3 big changes.
Changing careers or moving across the country and, starting a new life in a completely different area, usually a regional area.
I have certainly changed careers several times, and I have lived in different parts of the country. So I grew up in the Midwest in state here called Iowa, about 3 hours west of Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
and lived there for the first 2 decades of my life. And then moving to New England and Boston was very different. And then being on the West Coast is quite different from Boston and the Midwest. So I have done it 3 times, and professionally, I've also changed careers. When I left university a number of decades ago, I wanted to do 3 things. I wanted to get paid to write for a living. I wanted to work on political campaigns, and I wanted to work in human rights advocacy. And I've been fortunate to do all 3 things in the course of my career.
Yes, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I can see you have a government affairs, political advisory background, which is so interesting. And now here you are helping people find jobs and helping employers recruit the best talent. What led you to make that career transition? Am I explaining it right, what you do now? Maybe you could do a better job.
I think you're very clear. I run 2 small businesses. One is a regional job board. It's called maxlist.org. And if you visit the site, you'll find hundreds of jobs there in the states of Oregon and Washington. We also provide lots of content about how to look for work, as well as information about how to hire great candidates. I also run a public relations company that works with governments, nonprofits, and philanthropic organizations, foundations. I've been doing that for 15 years, and I've been running the job board in one form or another for 2 decades. I got into the job board business because I had 2 long periods of unemployment. One was in my 20s and one in my 30s. So I know what it's like to cash the last unemployment check. It takes about 30 weeks to reach that point here in the United States. And I came within 1 week of doing it a second time. And those experiences taught me 2 important lessons that eventually led me to create MaxList. One was the importance of learning job search skills. You can't just respond to ads. You've got to learn how hiring works, and then once you understand that system, find ways to make it work for you. The other important lesson I learned was the value of networking and building relationships with others. And good networkers don't just ask for help; they serve others. And my form of service came in sharing job postings. So I think everybody who's listening, we all get this email from a former colleague, a classmate. Hey, we're looking for help at our company or nonprofit, at our university. If you here's a posting. If you hear of any good candidates, send them my way or pass this along. I got a few more of those than most people, but not that many. But what I did that was different was I started sharing them with first dozens and eventually hundreds of people. And I did that because it was a way to be helpful to others. And nobody complains about getting a job posting. And eventually it turned into the business that we have today.
That's great. It's such a great story, and such a powerful one as well. And I'm, so glad that we've connected, because we come from the same DNA, I feel, Mac. So that strength of communicating and advocating and championing for causes and policies and now people is part of your DNA.
It is, and I've had many different jobs. I'm old. I'm 62. So I've been in the workplace for more than 40 years. I also worked in grade school and high school. But in my professional life, while I've been a speechwriter to a governor, I'm a communications director for state agencies and nonprofits, and worked in political campaigns and for elected officials. There's a constant that runs through all these different jobs, and that's trying to make a difference about issues I care about or in the community where I live and work.
Yeah. Was it hard for you, however, to transition your advocacy from your clients and your politicians to yourself? How do you explain the periods of unemployment? Do you find that was kind of an environmental effect on the areas that you wanted to work for, or were you at the time struggling to sell yourself to others? Because ironically, Mac, I have a lot of clients that have a similar background than you. You know, they come from comms, corporate affairs, and marketing, and they're easier to train and coach. But it's funny, and we often laugh how easy it is for them to be great professionals in their field, but how hard it is for them to sell themselves.
The point you're making is a good one. And I think the key idea here is you got to sell yourself. And I certainly, when I was out of work, knew how to advise my clients or my employers and how to promote their ideas or their services. I thought the most effective way of selling myself, particularly the first time I was out of work, was to reply to job ads. And I simply didn't know any better. And part of it was I'd had just blind good luck up till then. So I left college and I replied to an ad in the newspaper. I got a job on a U.S. Senate race, and it was a wonderful experience. I'd had an internship at university, and then that led to a professional job in Washington, D.C., which was waiting for me right after the U.S. Senate campaign. And then the third job I got just through word of mouth. It was with a human rights group in Boston that was looking for help. And someone who knew about the position told me about it. I cold called the manager, and the hiring manager introduced myself. And 3 weeks later, had an offer. So in hindsight, I can see all the things I did right without knowing how to do it. But when I left that third job, I thought it would be easy to get the next one. And I meet people professionally who still have that experience. What I didn't understand is how hiring works. And once you understand that, then marketing and selling yourself is an important part of it, but it's not the only thing. You've also got to know what you want to do and where you want to work and what you offer to employers. Because in that first period of unemployment, I was sending out the letters in response to ads. It was the old pre-internet days, and I was getting interviews, but I wasn't getting offers. And I wasn't getting offers because it was, in hindsight, I can see it was clear to the interviewers I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I was uncertain, and that's natural. But your job then is to figure that out. And I also didn't, while I was interested in these employers, I didn't know them well, and I didn't understand what their challenges were. And I couldn't, if I didn't know what their problems were, it's very difficult to show how you can help them.
Yeah.
And so those are things you have to do, whether you're a professional marketer or a job candidate of any kind. Know where you want to go, what you offer, and above all, what job do you want?
And Mac, how long have you had your job board for? I forget. It's been a decade or more?
Yes, for almost 10 years, I shared the listings informally through an email list, and then 10 years ago, I launched a website, and then started charging for postings about 7 years ago.
So I'm assuming that, like me, 2020 and 2021 were a roller coaster ride for you. So for context for you, I was just starting the Job Hunting podcast, whereas your podcast has been going for quite a while. And I remember batching all this content and recording a lot of episodes in a row, and then realizing they were all redundant topics that nobody would want to hear about them anymore. And I had to very quickly try, something new and record things really just in time. Every week, doing something that was really resonating with what was happening. Frankly, I was only a few hours ahead of other people from having done a bit more research. And I'm wondering how it affected you, your job board, and the job hunters in the Pacific Northwest.
We, at the business, we saw a big drop in revenue in March and April of 2020, and it didn't bottom out until June of that year. And then slowly it began going up. And since January of this year, our website sales are almost back to where they were in 2019. So it was a dramatic drop in job postings, though, and because we didn't know what would happen next, I have a staff of 4, and we did furlough people 2 days a week, and we have a government program here that allows you to pay people unemployment benefits when they've been furloughed, if you maintain health care and other benefits. So unemployment in the United States, in Oregon, provides about 45% of your lost wages. It doesn't replace it, but it's better than not getting anything. And our goal was to avoid eliminating jobs, to keep the team together, and because it's a catastrophe when you lose your job, and also for company, you want to hold on to your people. They're your best asset. So it was a challenging year in terms of traffic to the website and the podcast. We did see big drops in the spring, and talking to other job board operators in the United States, they saw similar drops, but the numbers began going up in the summer, and we're now back to pre-pandemic levels of traffic.
And Mac, this traffic that's now coming back, is it very similar to pre-COVID times, or do you find that the job ads and what employers want is somewhat different?
The difference is it's a job seekers market here in the United States right now. And that is a big change. Employers, particularly in the service industry, are sometimes struggling with that. There were big layoffs of people in service industries, particularly in the hospitality businesses, restaurants, hotels. And all those businesses went offline at about the same time, and they all came back at the same time. So they're all competing for a smaller group of workers, because many workers in the United States this spring and summer have decided they want to think before they take their next opportunity. And there was a record number of people in the United States this spring who quit their jobs voluntarily, the highest number in 20 years. So it's early days yet, but what appears to be happening is people have gone through this big, dramatic, life-changing experience, and they're either thinking carefully about what they want to do next before they say yes to returning to jobs they had, or they're in jobs now that they're thinking, well, I want to do something different, and I'll figure that out, but I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. And if you talking to people on your podcast, what are the topics that are really interesting for them and for you to talk about post-pandemic? Or we're in the middle of a pandemic still, but I'm just trying to get an idea of what the interest is overseas. I'll tell you what they are here in Australia. Here in Australia, there's a lot of talk about moving to regional areas. So people have identified that they don't need to go back to the workplace anymore. Telstra, which is our biggest telecommunication company in Australia, yesterday announced that they're workplace agnostic. And my husband, for example, works for an American company called DXC, and they're also promoting the fact that they are now virtual, and they're the biggest virtual company in the world. So you can work from home forever if you want to. This has caused a tremendous increase in house prices in regional areas and rentals as well. So everybody's moving away from the big lockdown towns, cities like Melbourne and Sydney, for example. Is that something that you're experiencing in the US as well?
There's certainly interest in working remotely from smaller towns and cities, and you'll see pundits and newspaper articles about what are called Zoom towns, places that are far from metropolitan areas. And the mayors and councils in those places are certainly boosting that idea. I haven't seen data that shows a huge change is happening. I think the big change that is happening here is most major employers who provide office jobs, they haven't brought their employees who've been working remotely back to work in significant numbers yet. That's starting to happen this summer and fall, or even not until early next year. And the numbers vary, but it appears to be that with large office employers, significant, if not a majority, a significant minority of the workforce has been working remotely. And as a result, people who have been doing that are telling their managers they either don't want to come back at all, or they want to just come back 1 or 2 days a week. And remote work and telework is something that has been under discussion in the United States for decades, but it never really seemed to take off. And I think now that you're seeing companies where 30, 35, 40% of their workforce has been working remotely and wants to keep doing it, they're probably not going to come back in significant numbers. And that is probably going to be a lasting change. In the social change I do in politics, they say the magic number is 25%. If you can get 25% of a community to change their behavior or support an idea, that's the tipping point. And so it appears that we probably have hit the tipping point for remote work and hybrid work. I think for job seekers and people who have jobs, that can be a great thing. Now you can avoid the commute, and you perhaps can move to an area to be closer to family, or things that are important to you, like natural beauty. I think you also need to recognize that for employers are now, instead of concentrating on a local market and only looking at candidates in their town or city, they're going to start looking across the country or even globally. So for candidates and people in mid-career or starting their careers, I think that means you've got to pay attention both to your virtual job search skills and your work skills once you're in a position. You've got to be able to work well remotely. You've got to be able to interview well on Zoom. You've got to know how to network with both colleagues and with industry leaders online and virtually, because if we are moving into a remote workforce future, people who have the skills to thrive in that environment are the ones who are going to have the most success.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to see how people that perform really well face-to-face have not transitioned so well to an online environment. And I was listening to I think it was your latest podcast, Matt. I don't know if you have another one, but I'll have a link to it below. And it was this very nice guy you interviewed about organizational culture. Remember that one?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and I was listening to it and thinking, gosh, how is it that we're going to work on organizational culture virtually if this is what's going to happen now? It's so much easier when you're in the water cooler or when you have everybody together. And there is this other chap in the UK, and I'll put a link to his Twitter below because he tweets very interesting ideas about potentially in the future doing face-to-face whenever you have to have this company experience so that you can boost the culture. But it's a point in time, isn't it, Mac? Like it's a point in time, and then you go back to your lonely office. And I was wondering, how workplaces and workers are going to cope mentally and also be productive over time, and what sort of work is going to be very effective done from individual home offices, and what sort of work will require us to sort of rethink and redesign how we do business. Have you put some thought into it?
Well, I've been struck by the unanimity almost about productivity in remote work. There doesn't seem to be any disagreement here in the United States. I don't know what it's like there, that people who are working remotely have been as productive as ever, even more productive. And of course, the concern before the pandemic, when you would hear about telework, is, well, how do I know someone will be at the computer? They could be doing their laundry or running errands, and all this sort of fell by the wayside. So I think that that's striking to me. I do think remote work has been happening at a much smaller scale for a long time now. So I think our challenge is going to be to look at examples of how organizations have successfully grown cultures organizational cultures when they have had their workforce distributed across the country or even the globe. I know the examples are out there. And to your point, I think the organizations that get good at that work and the employees who learn how to thrive in it are the ones who are going to have the most success and the best careers.
Yes, yes. So this is now new territory for both of us to dig into for a few episodes. Can you share with us some of your ideas for 2021, 2022? What are you planning to do with the job board, with the podcast?
Well, our podcast is a weekly show. It's called Find Your Dream Job. We focus on the nuts and bolts of job search. We get pretty granular about it. And that's what our listeners come for, practical advice about how to get your next job. And we look at topics like resume writing, interview preparation, goal setting. And we're always thinking about, in both choosing the guests and the topics and the questions, about the needs of job seekers. Because while I run a job board, and I'm very proud of the value it offers both to our employers and our readers, I'll be the first to tell you, if you're spending more than 20 or 30% of your time looking at job boards like mine, you're making your search harder and a lot more painful than it needs to be.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Mac, I have an optimized job search schedule that I've designed for that reason. Yes, I'd love to share with you. It's a 2-part workshop that I did the end of last year to help people that had lost their jobs and didn't want to spend Christmas, just thinking about it and worrying about it. They just wanted to get on with trying to find work. Some people don't really celebrate festivities, or depending on their culture. Or I remember losing my job just before Christmas in the past. And I know how stressful it can be. And you don't really do anything, but also you don't celebrate anything because you're not in the mood. So I did this optimized job search schedule, and it has a full-time schedule, a part-time schedule, and a light version. So if you have a job and you're job hunting on the side, you can use the light version. And I did that because of what you just said. So many people think that job hunting is basically going on a job board and just that rabbit hole. It's almost like social media or Facebook or anything like that. It just captures your attention, and you're there for hours, and then you're losing track of what you need to do. So I'll share it with you, and I'll have a link on the episode show notes if anybody wants to download it.
Well, I'd love to see it. And when I look ahead to the next year and beyond, there are many changes that are happening. I mean, remote work is a huge part of it, and the effect that the pandemic has had on all of us. But in careers and job search, I think the fundamentals matter more than ever, because particularly with so much work going online and happening remotely, there's going to be more competition. And so the people who are good at job search fundamentals and are thinking strategically about their career are going to have the most success. And so that's a constant for us. And those are ideas and topics that we return to again and again in our podcast and in the work that we do on our website.
No, that's excellent. Mac, I found you because I was doing some research, and I realized that people that were listening to my podcast were listening to your podcast. And my podcast is a baby compared to yours. So thank you for coming on board and speaking to us here. It's a real honor to meet you and to connect with people like you who share this love and interest and a real mission to help others find their career paths and improve in their job hunting skills. So thank you for coming on board.
Well, it's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I have listened to about a dozen of your shows. You're doing great work.
Thank
You're
you.
helping a lot of people. So
Thank
kudos
you.
to you.
Thanks. Bye for now, Mac.
Bye-bye.